So great meeting, everyone. I'm Clémence Moinier from IFAD. I'm an environmental and climate specialist focusing specifically on agroecology and biodiversity. So very looking forward to this conversation on agrobiodiversity. We're jumping ahead here a little bit. Hi, Monica. We have an amazing group of speakers from a lot of different paths of life and a lot of different segments of agrobiodiversity. So really looking forward to the conversation. Just a few remarks. There's a registration sheet going around. Please leave us your name, emails, and contact details so that we can keep the conversation going beyond this room as well. We'd really like to keep this going. Very briefly, to introduce the concept and what we want to talk about. Agrobiodiversity, as per CBD's definition, and we'll hear a little bit more about it, is really the outcome of the interaction among the genetic resources, as well as the environment and the management systems and practices on the farm. So when we talk about agrobiodiversity, we're talking about genetic resources specifically, but also how they interact with ecosystem services, the climate and the chemical structure of the environment, and the socioeconomic dimensions as well. So just making sure we're all talking about the same thing. And what we're looking for is for symbiotic relationship between each of these elements, those relationships being brought forward by complementarity, which is allowed through diversity. And we are so, passionate about this specific topic because of all the benefits that it brings forward, both in terms of achieving target 10 of the GBF, but also the benefits for ecosystem support. And as a result, the benefits that it brings farmers and consumers on climate resilience, nutrition, and livelihoods. So we have quite a packed agenda to go through. We will be talking specifically about knowledge and practices in the first segment, having some examples from the field about how agrobiodiversity is actually implemented. And then we'll be talking through the enabling environment as well, seed systems, markets, and policies, and how to use these as levers to implement agrobiodiversity further. Before we delve into the details, I'd like to introduce Monica Kobayashi for some opening remarks. Monica works at the CBD Secretariat, and she's responsible for the program of work on agrobiodiversity and inland waters. She supports countries with implementing the GBF targets, especially on food systems and pollution. We're really pleased to have the support of CBD and Monica here. Over to you.
Okay. Dear participants, thank you very much for this invitation. It's a pleasure and honor to be here with you today. Thank you for Bioversity for this invitation. So last December, as you know, the world adopted the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. And if we take a close look in the framework, we can see that the food systems, they touch all targets, from target 1 on land use and CU management to target 23 on gender equality. So I could give some examples that she already mentioned, like target 2 on ecosystem restoration, target 4 on genetical resources and conservation in situ and ex situ, target 7 on pollution, target 10 on sustainable agriculture, target 11 on ecosystem services, target 22 on indigenous people, local communities, and so on and so forth. So the food system really goes across. To fully achieve the Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, we need this food system transformation. And to achieve this transformation, agrobiodiversity is key because it's the basis of the food system. The last agriculture transition that we had was the Green Revolution. And for this revolution, it was the key thing was to have increase in productivity. Yeah, productivity gain. But now, for this transition that we aim to achieve, what is needed is to make the linkage between genetic resources for food and agriculture resilience in the environment, and also nutrition. So this became the main premise to have the food system transformation. This became urgent. This became priority. But to better understand those linkages, we need crop varieties. We need Creole seeds. We need crop wild relative species. And as we know, we're losing many of these species. And the reasons are many reasons that we already know, like agriculture expansion, deforestation, monoculture, climate change, and also due to consumption and also our diet patterns. So, dear participants, we know that the improvement of agrobiodiversity and its ecosystem services in the field can be part of the solution to tackle multiple global crises, including water crisis, land degradation crisis, climate, and biodiversity loss. So, paradoxically, we're losing our agrobiodiversity because of many of the agricultural practices that we have currently in place. But the good news is that we're not starting from zero. Last decade, during the Aichi targets, we had a lot of improvement in all areas of agriculture. Although we didn't achieve fully any of the Aichi targets, but we can build upon what we have already. And to make this decade successful, we need to bring on board small farmers, family farmers, indigenous people and local communities, women and youth, to maintain, restore, and make sustainable use of agricultural biodiversity. This inclusion will be key to the success of the GBF. And there is also a need to recognize the traditional knowledge and the indigenous knowledge, and also to reintroduce the neglected crops, not only at the farmer level, but also for nutrition level. And we need to scale up and invest on traditional and also innovative practices to produce nutritious foods and reverse biodiversity loss. So for this, agrobiodiversity must be reflected in NAB, but also in other national plans, including agricultural plans, the food pathway plans, nutrition, everything. And then my takeaway message today is that agrobiodiversity conservation, sustainable use, and restoration are central for the food system transformation, and also to achieve the global biodiversity framework and the sustainable development goals. So agrobiodiversity needs to be reflected in the climate, in the food and the nutrition strategy in a coherent manner. We cannot have those trade-offs that can affect agrobiodiversity. And we need to bring together everyone that is producing our nutritious food. And more importantly, to give to those people the way to work, technological capacity, as well financial resources. So this way they can be active part of this food transformation system that we're requesting. So if we have 2 hectares here, 5 hectares neighbor, more 10 hectares, that all sustainable managed, we have a big productive landscape that is sustainable. So together we can guarantee food security and also bend the curve of biodiversity loss. These 2 objectives need to go together, hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. Thank you for touching on all of the points that we will expand on, but talking about the enabling environment, the inclusion of indigenous people, women, youth, smallholder farmers, talking about the landscape approaches, all of these are really key to agrobiodiversity. I think everyone, or the majority of people around this room were really pleased to see agriculture and agroecology not just as a driver of biodiversity loss, but also as part of the solution in the past GBF, and you've highlighted this again. We know that the road ahead is long. The road to more agroecological food systems is long, but agrobiodiversity really is a key to arrive there. And the reason why it is a key to reinforce what agrobiodiversity brings forward to the GBF is not only for soil and water resource management, as we can see in Target 10, but also the restoration and the conservation of habitats and species, as well as some climate resilience, nutrition, and livelihoods benefits, as we mentioned. And all of this is achieved through the finance, incentives, and subsidies reforms, hearing and amplifying indigenous people knowledge and voice, recognizing the labor of women, as well as reforming local markets and value chain transformation. So you'll recognize that all of these aspects are truly mainstream throughout all of the GBF targets. And so agrobiodiversity, as far as we're concerned, really is a key to achieve the GBF as a whole. Not only the GBF, but also the SDGs, the Paris Agreement, and the food system transformation through the different national food systems pathway, because of those climate resilience nutrition benefits as well. I will hand over to my colleague Carlo to talk in more details about the specific benefits that agrobiodiversity brings forward. Carlo is the research director at Alliance Biodiversity International and CIAT, specifically on biodiversity for food and agriculture. And he is also the Nature Positive Initiative lead and the principal scientist on genetic biodiversity at CGIAR. Over to you, Carlo.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this introduction, and thank you for inviting me to be here, which is a big honor and a privilege to be here. And I think a lot has been already said, and the time allocated would not allow to go into too many details, but let me try to frame it in a little bit more details why agrobiodiversity is important. And this is what happens. I mean, Madame Kobayashi mentioned the kind of environmental damage system that has brought to those damages. And when you look at this the impact of the industrial agriculture system, this has been developed by UNEP. You can see that it affects a number of what the crisis that we are in now. So you have soil depletion, you have biodiversity loss, you have malnutrition, you have climate, and all of this is kind of interconnected to a set of practices that are not sustainable from an environmental point of view. So you and these are basically, in a nutshell, derived from the Green Revolution, very linear extractive agriculture, which extracts soil nutrients, which extract water, which cut forest to produce more food. And so as the result, next slide, as a result, we now face a number of challenges. More than half of the population is facing malnutrition, undernutrition, obesity, one of the triple burden of malnutrition. There has been a significant loss of biodiversity, not only agrobiodiversity, from a total of over 6,000 plant species that have been described as good, as eatable by humans. Only 9 contribute to 60% of the total crop production, and we discuss this later. Agriculture is responsible for about between 25, 1/4 and 1/3 of the total greenhouse gas emission, depending on how you calculate. And it's also victim of that, because that leads to yield decline and difficulties in achieving further gains, and it exacerbates further land degradation, which is now at 40%. 40% of the total land under agriculture is, in a way or another, degraded. Next one. And you can appreciate better how this one is, how the agrobiodiversity is actually not part of the solution at the moment. The 20 major crops cultivated, over 82% of the global agricultural area, and the other 117, if you take the 137, only occupies 18% of the agricultural land. That was in 2007. And so that is a big opportunity loss, if you want, in terms of using that agrobiodiversity for improving the resilience, the nutrition outcome, the climate outcome, the biodiversity outcome of our production system. Next one. And because of the interest of time, I will give a little bit of a framework under which one can think of genetic diversity. First of all, it's important to note that there are a number of national and international gene banks or ex situ facilities in which the agrobiodiversity is concerned. This could be including some live gene bank for some crops that cannot be stored under these facilities. And these are, of course, it's important that these long-term facilities are there to conserve for the long term this agrobiodiversity. But then we need to make sure that if we say that this is part of the solution and if we want to bring them back into the production system, we need to have this to be accessible to the farmers, and we need to understand better how they can contribute to one of the different crises. And that is the DNA part that you see up there, where you really need a little bit of science. You need to understand what is from a molecular point of view, because genetics and genomics play an important part in understanding the linkage between diversity, the environment, the consumers, etc., and also morphologically, how they adapt to different climatic and local conditions. But that's, as it was mentioned by Madam Kobayashi and by Clémence, it's not enough to get some answer. We need the farmers. We need to have the farmers to tell us from their experience what actually works under their condition. And so, for example, we can use, and again, I'm thinking of kind of big data and from a science mind, a citizen science approach, really give this material to the farmers so that they can test under their own condition and they can tell us what is that really works, what is that is in there for them. And so the role of the farmers become really, really important in terms of co-develop and co-design those solutions. We need to understand how this diversity then relates to the environment. So we need to understand the soil, the weather, what makes it a good solution for a particular location. And we also need to understand the feedback from the farmer, us as researcher or extension officer, etc. And again, the information technology can come in hand. And so the farmers can give that feedback using mobile phones. And once you have it there, and once you have agreed on which crops varieties are really useful for the farmers, we need to make them available to the farmers. And so we need to develop seed systems. If seed systems are not there, we can have the best solution, but then the farmers cannot have access to this beautiful solution, and so we have done nothing. So community-based seed is an important part. If some private actor is interested in investing in some of these solutions, of course, they also play an important role. But many times, some of these neglected crops or traditional varieties, they don't have enough market potential for a private actor to be interested and invest in those crops and varieties. And so many times, at least, you need to start with community-based or farmers-based seed system. An example could be the community seed banks. Obviously, at the end of all this process, we find a lot of things that are not useful under the current climate or cultural or preferences situation, and so they go back for long-term conservation in the national or international gene banks. An approach such as this one can really contribute very significantly to Target 4 in terms to reduce the extinction risk, to maintain and restore genetic diversity within and between population of native, wild, and domesticated species, to maintain their adaptive potential, because when they are on the ground and the farmers are using, their adaptive potential is maintained, including through in situ and ex situ conservation and sustainable management practices. So let's go into the idea that it's not just the genetics, it's not just the crops, but you also need to link to management practices. And in the next slide, I give another example on how all of this can become better integrated. So you can have a number of tools and approach where you can use tree genetic diversity, because there was recently a paper on Nature in which they were mentioning, they were evaluating how the diversifying production system contribute to livelihood, income, environmental. And what was obvious is that all diversification is good, but the one that works really better for the different trade-off is agroforestry. So we need the trees. And once again, we need not just any tree. We need trees that are adapted to the local condition, trees that can benefit the farmers. And so this element of forest genetic resources, when we talk about agrobiodiversity, really becomes important. And here are some of the tools that can be proposed: diversity for restoration, again, using GIS and a lot of modern technology to actually achieve this. And again, having agroforestry contribute to target 7, because now you create a system where you don't have pollution, where you don't need so much external or inorganic inputs. So you reduce the pollution risk and the negative impact of pollution, which is one of the targets. But then also you start creating systems that are areas under agriculture and forestry that are managed sustainable, and particularly through the sustainable use of biodiversity. So target 10 could be a very important component of having agrobiodiversity in production system. And they're just mentioning the main one, because there are more that could be mentioned. Next one. And then there is the nutrition. The nutrition is really an important part, because a lot of these locally adapted crops are well adapted. I mean, the crops have been domesticated between 10,000 and 5,000 years ago, and they underwent through a lot of selection and pressure. Now we have an accelerated climate change, but in 5,000–10,000 years, there was a lot of climate change, and a lot of these crops develop traits that make them adapted to both biotic and abiotic conditions. So having those crops particularly those that are still used by the farmers, by the smallholder farmers, is really important, because they are well adapted to pests and diseases, drought and climate change. They can easily be available to farmers. They are affordable. Sometimes they are even available in the wild. They are nutritious because they are very high in micronutrients, and so they contribute to a healthy and balanced diet. And they are connected to other traditional medical cultural knowledge, so the target 22 on traditional knowledge of this agrobiodiversity. And that next one, just to give an example of the magnitude. So for example, in Kenya, since we are hosted by Kenya, one of the major vegetable is cabbage. And and cabbage is basically almost replacing the traditional vegetables. And the traditional vegetables 20 years ago were almost about to disappear. You couldn't find in the supermarkets. It was the food of the poor. It was something that people didn't want to eat anymore. And now they are everywhere. They are intangible cultural heritage by UNESCO. So they get a lot of relevance in any major supermarket in Kenya. You find them. But what is really important is what they contribute. If you compare cabbage to amaranth, for example, the level of vitamin A in amaranth is 39 times more than the cabbage. If you take the Malabar spinach and other traditional vegetable, it's 13 times richer in cabbage, and we know how much relevant is iron deficiency in Kenya. So just to mention that conserving, protecting, using this agrobiodiversity will also address the nutrition crisis, which, by the way, is linked to target 16 that ensure that people are encouraged and enabled to make sustainable consumption choice. And that's to say that we don't just have to focus on the farmers and the production, but that the consumers need to be a very important target group, because they are the one that will shape demand, and they are the one that eventually will allow the farmers to transition towards agroecology. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Carlo, for these insights. I'll be very brief because we're already running a little bit out of time and we have a lot to cover. But as Carlo mentioned and Monica did before, the role of indigenous people, local communities, smallholder farmer, women as well on today's International Day of the Rural Woman, worth acknowledging and really amplifying the voices and the practices of those who have harbored agrobiodiversity for years already. Not only for us to achieve all of the fantastic benefits that Carlo highlighted, but also to ensure that the implementation and the achievement of the GBF is fair, so that it doesn't hamper the rights and the culture of those who have harbored and who are everyday safeguarding biodiversity, and so that the benefits that we will undoubtedly reach through more agroecology and more agrobiodiversity also fall back onto those that have safeguarded it. And so I'm really pleased today that we have some representative, either online or in person, of indigenous people communities as well as farmers. We will start with a brief video of Jacqueline Macharia, who unfortunately couldn't be here, but she will be speaking on behalf of the IFAD Indigenous Peoples Assistance Facility, where she is hosted at the Samburu Women Trust about indigenous communities' practices on agrobiodiversity. We then have Dr. Babatemi Oyebole, who is the CEO of Pan-African Farmer Organization, who will give insights into practices in the region. And then not only is it important to implement those practices, but it's also important to be able to use and to collect the evidence, to be able to convince people more broadly about its effectiveness and its impacts. And so Dr. Carolina Frias will be talking to us about the Agrobiodiversity Index put together by CGIAR and the Alliance CIAT on how to better measure the benefits of agrobiodiversity. Just after a minute.
Oh,
So this will be the introduction for this whole first segment on the tools and the practices for agrobiodiversity. There'll be a short round of Q&A at the end, so prepare your questions if you have any. And I will now try to make the video start.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for the opportunity to share our experiences in partnering with indigenous communities as relates to agrobiodiversity for climate adaptation, food security and nutrition. My name is Jackie Macharia and I am the Africa Indigenous Peoples Assistance Facility, in short we call it EPAF, coordinator at Samburu Women Trust. The EPAF is a facility from the International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, and is in and of itself a mechanism for engaging with indigenous people. It provides resources for indigenous communities to design and implement initiatives that are relevant to their well-being. The facility is decentralized and implemented regionally by indigenous peoples organizations. In Africa, it is by Samburu Women Trust. Indigenous peoples have not required incentives to protect their biodiversity because they see themselves as guardians and custodians. They intrinsically understand the principles of reciprocity and complementarity, and this is why agrobiodiversity has been practiced for generations. An example from our facility is in Ethiopia, where the Gamo community thrives on one of the neglected and ignored species called the insect plant, famously known as the false banana because it has the structure of a banana plant but does not produce bananas. This plant has a water retention of up to 7 years and has over 29 varieties as per our last initiative in the area, and hence a critical species for these communities to adapt to climate change. The communities also use the trunk to make bread, which is highly nutritious. In Cameroon, the Baka communities, who are hunter-gatherers and once lived in the forests, have been harvesting wild yams they depended on in the forest and are now propagating them in their homes because of the high rate of deforestation that is leading to the loss of this species. From the initiative in Cameroon, a small study was carried out to analyze the organoleptic characteristics of wild yams, and one of the outcomes is that wild yams are full of antioxidants. Finally, allow me to speak of how spirituality plays a critical role in agrobiodiversity. The traditional practices around circumcision among the Maasai of Tanzania allow them to protect a community forest that ensures food for their livestock during dry seasons. And in Ethiopia, still with the Gamo community, they have sacred sites that are not tampered with during certain seasons to restore the microbiome of the soil and to rejuvenate that environment so that they can use it during the dry seasons for farming and for feeding their livestock. Because of time, ladies and gentlemen, I've only shared a few examples of agrobiodiversity initiatives that indigenous communities are working on and that have the potential for climate adaptation, food security, and nutrition. We hope in your deliberations an emphasis will be placed on collecting more tangible examples and data from indigenous communities that can provide solutions for climate adaptation, mitigation, and food security. Thank you very much.
We will transmit this to them remotely. Dr. Oyewole, over to you.
Thank you very much, Clémence, for also inviting a Pan-African Farmers Organization to share their perspective on agro. Agrobiodiversity and agroecological solutions and best practices from farmers organizations. First of all, let me introduce Pan-African Farmers Organization. The presentation is because of time, that's why I'm rolling. So we are recognized as the highest representative body of African farmers. Actually, we call ourselves the voice of African farmers. And because we have a membership of 80 million spread across the 5 regions and 73 national organizations in 14 countries in Africa. And we were created in 2010 by the African Union, who were the one who sponsored the organization, and we're based in Kigali. And the regional network is East African Farmers Federation, BOPAC, LOPA in West Africa, BOPAC is in Central Africa, SACAO in South Africa, and UNAGRI in the North African region. So we intervene through representation, policy advocacy, information sharing and knowledge management, and cross-cutting issues, promotion like women and youth empowerment. And they also the leadership development of youth and women. So we, as I don't need to spend much time because previous speakers have given the overview of it. But what I want to emphasize is the fact that agriculture is very important because of its large use of land and the implications that has on the climate and biodiversity. And we know that trees enhance the biodiversity value of agricultural landscape. So that makes it, and as we have been told that farmers need to be at the center of any agroecology or agrobiodiversity initiatives that are taking place in the next one, please. Now I'm going to share the experience that we have a project we call Farmers Organization for African, Caribbean, and Pacific regions, which is being supported by IFAD, and we had a knowledge management conference in May this year, where we bring all the partners together to discuss their experiences, and that's where this experience was shared among the various participants. So particularly, I want to share this experience in 5 Pacific countries: Fiji, Cook Islands, Solomon Islands, Papua New Guinea, and Tonga. So it concerns the collection of breadfruit crop in this country. So the 5 island countries, they have different varieties. Currently, they have 14 varieties that are collected from local communities. And the target was a total of 21 varieties to be collected and planted into 2 rural training centers, and which is used as a genome bank. So we see that the research that was done about 24 years ago show that Fiji had 58 varieties, but some have been lost over the years. So the Balekana mean Samoa stands out as the most popular and widely distributed across the land. Also, there's another variety that has some distinct historical significance, which is May Banaba. And because it is believed to have been introduced by the Banaban Islanders and has since acclimatized to the environment, and that makes it to be able to be cultivated by the people. This adaptation has resulted in climate resilience practices and also production, and abundant food production that is contributing to food supply in the region. And what sets it apart as a significant variety is that its characteristics of being consumable raw. They can consume it raw, and also it eliminates the need for cooking. So that is a ready-made food for the population. That's what makes it so unique among the various communities. Now, next one. Also, we have the farmers organization in Congo, Brazzaville, Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo, who have established a training center for agroecology and agrobiodiversity training. And they have found that they are capacitating the farmers on these agroecology, agrobiodiversity practices that will make them to be more productive and to be able to also restore the nature. Actually, the practices that they are teaching them include tree planting, crop diversification, landscape management, agroforestry, and sustainable and soil management and biodiversity conservation, so that the farmers will adopt those practices. And when they go back to their farms, they are already putting them into practice. So again, a study was conducted in Kenya here by Simon Wamboy, Samburu, and others on biodiversity loss, and it's again through practices in agricultural landscape of subsistence-based farming systems in the eastern Kenya. And the study revealed that households from lower midland zones with high crop diversity and richness were more food secure compared to those from the upper midland zones with low crop diversity. So that shows also that diversity of crops can also enrich biodiversity. One thing we saw also in Rwanda is the launching of the biodiversity policy, where government is taking deliberate actions to promote the biodiversity initiatives among the communities, and particularly the farming community, which is a very good model which we are advocating for other countries to really emulate and adopt. Having specific policies by the government, that would mean that they will be like Dr. Carlos said, that the crops that are no more in existence, that private sector are not interested in them. I mean, in bringing them back. It's government support that will enable those crops to come back again. And when the assessment of this policy has begin to achieve significant results, like Elise said that Rwanda has made incredible advances towards achieving its ambitious restoration target of 2 million hectares. The country's investment in forest landscape restoration are estimated to have a potential economic benefit of $628 million US. So and this is reflected in the agroecology and biodiversity score. So we see that if there's policy and government support, the biodiversity can be something that is widely adopted by the stakeholders in the agricultural sector. So conclusion, with farmers are innovatively developing initiatives, what they need to do is to be supported And that's what farmers organizations are doing. And we are supporting our members to adopt those practices. And what we are saying is that policymakers, government, to support the farmers and the organization, farmers organization to continue to support the farmers. And finally, we are going to collaborate and partner with the global diversity framework to ensure that the capacity of our farmers are built to be able to understand and also adopt the initiatives that are being promoted in the framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Ali?
So thank you very much, Clémence. And thank you to all of you for attending this event. And so good morning. My name is Carolina Navarrete. I work at the Alliance of Biodiversity International in CIAT. And we're here to present to you part of the work that we have been advancing on agrobiodiversity. And it's really about the Agrobiodiversity Index, which is actually part of the monitoring system and indicators of Target 10. Next, please. So this is a framework, the Agrobiodiversity Index is a framework, but it's also methodology that was developed to monitor the conservation and use of agrobiodiversity. And it's looking at 3 major pillars of our food system. So it has been developed with a whole of system approach in terms of the food systems. So it's looking at consumption, production, and conservation. And its development also bear in mind the global biodiversity framework, and it addresses or it's aimed to address different targets of the global biodiversity framework, as you can see there, target 4, 12, and 10, for example, but also the SDGs. So it connects or interconnects with all these global goals in terms of contributing to sustainable agriculture, contributing to healthy diets, and contributing to the current and future options in terms of conservation. So it's important to mention how it was developed. It was not only developed from the science, it was developed through a very strong collaborative process in consultations with government, business, and civil society, so that its structure was responding to the demand and also the vision of other stakeholders. So mainly for the 3 main dimensions that were mentioned, conservation, production, and consumption, we're looking at the status, the actions, and the commitments. So that's what the index is going to be looking at, and with its indicators. So it has a total or a set of 22 indicators, and you can see there, for example, in terms of consumption or production, it's looking at varietal diversity, species diversity, underutilized species, and others. And each of these indicators is measured at a global, national, or personal databases, so it can really have a range. But the initial work of the index, of course, was developed looking at global public databases. As I was saying, okay, so important also to say that it's looking at the production systems, including livestock, crop, and fish systems, which is, of course, very relevant for the GBF. Now we can, thank you. So this is an example of the index, Agrobiodiversity Index application at the global level. And here we have, and I'll be happy to share with you some publications we already have as well, making a global analysis using 17 out of the 22 indicators. Why only 17? Because those were of which the data was available globally. This exercise has also been useful actually to identify where are the gaps of information, and I think that's something quite relevant as we move in the implementation of the GBF, and is to identify where we need to strengthen the data collection in the country so that we can run this type of global analysis. I'm sure you saw in the complementary information for the Substat that there is one about the global review. and how the CBD is looking forward in terms of performing the global review of the GBF. So we have this web page that is called Diversity Lighthouse, and I would like to invite all of you to visit this website. It's public, it's free, and it's where you can see the country's scores at the sub-indicator, indicator, and category levels. And if we put the mouse on the sun there on the circle, I think you will before on the circle, on the figure of the circle. Oh, okay, that's not so well. But if you go on the website, you can see there more in detail, like the scores for each of those indicators, looking at the status, the actions, and the commitments. And it's interesting to look at this free because it's also looking at how, in terms of how, for example, is agrobiodiversity at the country level. That's when we're talking about the status. The actions is, well, really what our countries undertaking in terms of agrobiodiversity, but the commitments, it's also looking at more at the policy side and how we're seeing this kind of transform in terms of policy action and more like the policy commitment. So next one, please. But we are also, and this is very relevant for the context we have now in the GBF, right? Now we're moving from the global agreements, and now we are facing the challenges, or I will say more the opportunity of moving at the national level. So here we're also developing country profiles. For example, we're working with the government of India and the Indian Council of Agricultural Research. We're calculating now this profile for India using the Indian data sets, and that has the advantage, and of course it depends on each case, but is that it will have a higher temporal and spatial resolution to allow for more detailed and precise analysis. So just mentioning this to say that we'll be very happy to move this forward to run analysis at the national and subnational levels that could really, it has that flexibility and we can downscale it. Okay, so going back to the Diversity Lighthouse website, for some of the indicators that depending on the availability of those databases, we're able to see changes throughout time. And here's an example comparing the timeline between 1993 and 2021 in terms of understanding, and this is part of the value and how we see it could really contribute into the monitoring, for example, of Target 10, of which countries are gaining or losing agrobiodiversity. And it's looking at the production systems at the national level. And we also think that the value of this type of tools and monitoring or tracking tools is to really help countries understand, okay, what is agrobiodiversity and how I apply it on the ground and what will I need to monitor, right? So that is part of what we're trying to simplify and untangle in some way for parties to be able to strengthen their monitoring systems, but also being able to simplify them and adapt them to their local realities and needs. So here, for example, what we're looking at is the species diversity, crop diversity, and landscape complexity are two of the data sets that we have been able to track throughout time, and that we consider are very useful for the monitoring of Target 10. We also have pesticide use, as we know it also links back to Target 7. So we know that all the targets in many ways are interconnected. And just to assess the progress of Target 10. Next one. This is just the team and some of the recent blogs and papers. But especially, we are very open, and as we're developing this tracker that I just showed, we're very interested in working along with partners and with countries on the ground to really be able to implement it, to fine-tune it. So please reach out to us and let us know if you have any comments, if you have any suggestions, if you would like us to trial this with you on the ground. We'll be very excited to do that. And here's part of the team that developed this. It recently won the Food Planet Prize. So we're very proud of that achievement as well. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Caroline. With everyone's permission, we'll share the slides if you have put your emails in the registration sheet, so you can see all of the links that we were trying to take, but didn't quite work. Yeah, absolutely. There should be 2 going around, so if you haven't registered yet, it should come to you. Thank you. Still very conscious of time. Is there any burning questions for this first segment? If not, we will just merge the Q&A in one at the end of the second segment. Right, we'll merge it at the end. Also, to reassure you, there is some food outside waiting for you as soon as we're over. All right, sorry. Right, okay. The slides will be shared. Okay, moving forward then, I'd like to open the second segment on enabling environments. I won't talk too much, just to say that all of these fantastic tools and practices we've just seen cannot be mainstreamed without an enabling environment. And we can't move from a food system that is currently about 3 major crops going around to one that is diverse and diverse in their species and in the variety of the food that we have, without having the right policies in place, the right incentives in place, and the right financial mechanisms. So I'm really pleased to introduce the various speakers for this third segment. First, we'll be talking about the seed system with Dr. Cargill Masso from the CJR Impact Area Platform on Environment and Biodiversity, as well as Anne Mena, chairperson of the Seed Sovereignty Working Group and coordinator of the BATK, working on Biodiversity and Biosafety Association. We'll then have another segment focusing on policies with Dr. John Garcia, who's the program manager of policy and advocacy at BioVision Foundation, as well as his colleague at the government of Tanzania, working on Tanzania's agroecological and organic strategy. You'll be able to spell it out better than me. And we'll close with a segment on markets as well with Charles Dewa, who is the Chief Executive of Knowledge Transfer Africa, who's not here today, but also sent us a video. So seed systems, policies, and markets, that's the 3 main components of the second segment. And I'd like to invite Dr. Masso. Thank you.
I can do it from here. So I will try to be brief because Carol and the family has said most of what is there. We talk about mainly seeds, and this is more very important for nutrition. It's also important for biodiversity. But we have to secure the seeds, and for the seeds, the critical things, we have to make sure that they are available and accessible to the farmers. And the quality is there. I will come back to the quality. The other one is about this whole deep science. That will be an extra, so we can move to the next one. For the next slide. So from the next slide, what we here care about the biodiversity of seeds, the fellow has done a great job to tell us the risk we are running. If we are losing 75% of the diversity for the last 100 years, where are we heading to? That is also the same issues for the livestock. And we just depend mainly on 12 plants and 5 animals. That is dangerous. And we need to work hard in terms of biodiversity, and that starts with seeds. We can't only depend on rice, maize, and wheat. Something has to be done differently. We can move to the next one. So the next one here, I try to scan what Carol was talking about the different seed systems. We have the community-based seed systems, but we have also the private sector seed systems, and you can have also the public seed system. When we try to scan in terms of different opportunities, and here I want just to focus on diversity, biodiversity, availability of the seed, ease access, we can only see that it's the community-based seed systems that can allow us to achieve it. The others can still do something, but it's very complex for others. But we know at the end of the day, we talk about the different interactions between the different actors. We can't also leave the community-based systems on its own. There could be also significant risks in terms of quality and also diversification itself. If we can move to the next one. Here's a good example. We have several countries doing it. I just picked the example of China because it was available. But the key, it reflects what the farmers are doing themselves, but what other organizations are doing. Carol, others, we see a lot of NGO working in the area. What could be the work of those also? And how do we make sure that there is interactions between research centers in the different seed systems. That is also very critical. And it's a good example that we may need to consider for the other parts of the world as well. We can move to the next one. And here I'm really referring to the neglected and underutilized crops. Carol was showing us in terms of the nutritional value of most of them. But if you were to go outside and ask most of the consumers how much they know in terms of the nutritional values of those crops, do we see that it's very little. It has kept by those who are doing the science. So there is a need to do more science about those neglected crops, and the special outline clearly create the awareness of the nutrition facts of most of those crops. How do we make sure that all the consumers, educated and less educated, have access to the nutritional facts? Then I was referring to the need to make sure that there is a system that supports the community-based systems in terms of keeping the purity of the seeds, but also the quality of the seeds as well. And of course, there is something that I value a lot, and others have been talking about it, making sure that we have demonstration sites for most of those crops, because you can only go for what you have seen. And the young people are missing those opportunities. And there is a need of having those learning field schools where people can learn more about those neglected and underutilized crops, which have high value. We can move to the next one. And really, in terms of the way forward, some of the things that there is a clear need to promote those other crops so that we can be able to diversify. But there is a need to strengthen the capacity of the seed systems, especially for the community-based seed systems. That is not only for the production, but for the organizational arrangement and skills, and also financing mechanisms. That is something that is very critical. Then there is a need of experience sharing. We are sharing experience share. How do we make sure that the seed systems actors have the opportunities also to share experience? That would be very, very critical. And the one other thing that is very also critical, I was happy when my colleague was talking about the case of Rwanda with this policy on agrobiodiversity. It's something that is critical in terms of developing policies in those areas. And the special, I like it a lot, having in situ demonstration of agrobiodiversity. Now to conclude on this one, is really what people have said, that is an integrated approach. We talk about agrobiodiversity not only for nutrition, but it's what we need also to adapt to the climate change. And the research is needed to understand the evolution of the different species and see what we need to adapt, especially to adjust given the conditions. The climate is changing whether we want it or not, then we need to find ways to adapt. And how do we make sure that there is financial education, people can see the different opportunities for economic diversification through agrobiodiversity. So our question, that is what I want to share with you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Anna, with you.
Thank you very much. As introduced, my name is Anna. I coordinate the Biodiversity and Biosafety Association of Kenya, which is a network of smallholder farmers, community-based organizations, animal welfare networks working on issues of biosafety and biodiversity. I also chair the Food Sovereignty Working Group under the Intersectoral Forum on Agrobiodiversity and Agroecology. This is a forum that comprises civil society, government agencies, some partners like Biovision Foundation and GIZ. The genesis of this ISFA platform, beginning around 2020, with discussions starting as far back as 2018, is that what would happen in Kenya, we're based in Kenya, is that there would be a lot of discussions on issues of seed, but there was never a platform where government, civil society, partners and others were speaking to each other. And so ISFA came into force, and it has been a very good platform, because for me to be able to start 7 technical working groups, all the way from law and policy, and now seed sovereignty and other issues that are discussed in here. And one of the things that we are almost achieving, we are working on a national agroecology strategy in the country. Some of the counties in Kenya under the devolution system, like Murang'a County, has passed the FACT agroecology policy and strategy in the country. And that has been very instrumental because many of the ISPA platform members have been able to engage on that. But back to the issue of seed, which we have been discussing, one of the main issues we have been focusing is promoting the farmer managed seed system. Because we realize that of the challenges, and the law in Kenya has been very restrictive on recognition of the farmer varieties and the farmer managed system. From that platform, we have even begun a process to review our seed laws in Kenya so that there's recognition of the farmer management systems and avoid really reaching a point where the farmers, even as we support the growth of the community seed banks or community seed learning centers, which we call them, to conform to the law, they are able to continue with that system of seed reviving their local varieties. And you and I know that a lot of the traditional varieties that have been shown by even my previous presenters are very rich in terms of nutrition, they are climate resilient, and they're able to withstand a lot of the climatic shocks. Just last week on the 11th and the 12th of October, we had the second National Seed Fair. We were calling it the Indigenous Seed and Food Culture Harvest Fair, in collaboration with the Genetic Resources Center in Kenya, the Gene Bank, the National Museums of Kenya, various government agencies, the Alliance of the CIAT, and all these partners, we partner together with them, and we're able to hold a national event. Apart from that, there are several events happening at the local level to promote farmer variety, because for a long time these have been neglected. Even the government of Kenya, when they speak about food security, it's all focused on maize. We don't have maize, we don't have food. But we are the center of origin of crops like sorghum. We have a variety of millet, but have been losing them. And the museum covers the herbarium in the country, and they have been very keen, and they're very keen to support the farmer managed systems. And so in terms of supporting even livelihoods for the smallholder farmers, some of the interesting, and we are producing several videos, and one of them is going to show on TV this evening, K24. The group that we're working with in Butula in Busia County, the women group started saving their seed. And for a long time, I never realized exactly why they started. And one of the interesting bits later I found out is that in the 90s, in the early 2000s, when the pandemic for HIV/AIDS was very big, the village was really impacted by many affected by HIV and AIDS. And so there was a lot of effort in supplying the antiretroviral drug. And the women felt these drugs are very taxing to our bodies. We need to eat and have a rich diet. And so they brought back their local vegetables, their millet, the sorghum. They have grown to such an extent, they supply now the local schools with millet for their forage, which is more nutrient than, and is able to support the community in there. But one of the things that we also see is the linkage to the market. My colleague from AFSA, where we are also members, the Alliance for Food Sovereignty in Africa, is going to talk about the issues of market. And what we have is what you're calling territorial markets, your local markets. How do you support the markets where the farmers need to be linked to the consumers and support that system so that you can bring on board those so-called organic markets or agroecological markets where we make it very affordable and the consumer demands for those local varieties to ensure that we build a system that works. One of the challenges that we have seen in the communities that we work with, the younger generation is not very much interested in agriculture. They want to go to the cities and look for so-called white-collar jobs. They're not really interested in their sector. But supporting the youth in having this agroecology entrepreneurship, the farmers market, the baskets every weekly to support them. We have the case of the very progressive farmer called Sylvia Kuya, who supplies a lot of the organic products in the market. But looking also at the challenges that we face, there's a big challenge of the highly hazardous pesticides in the country. The farmers want to use, for example, the herbicides to manage the weeds, because they don't have that capacity. Your average farmer is of 50 years, they are old. But how do we support the farmers to move away from this high level that's specified? We've engaged at the policy level and the country level. In fact, our pest control and products body, which is the regulator, has begun a process to remove from the market about 7 products that we had identified. It's been a big fight because we then had to petition in Parliament, and we continue to do that work. But at the international level, with the push for the removal of this the Europe being able to export this highly hazardous pesticide, but not accepting it in their market, how do we ensure that the country is able to remain safe and the farmers produce food in an appropriate way? So thank you very much. I wanted to share that at the local level, and I hope the interaction.
Thank you very much, Anna. Thank you also for mentioning the policy efforts. It's a perfect segue to the next presentation.
Thank you very much, Clémence.
Yeah.
My presentation is full of transitions. So yeah, thank you very much. I have given 5 minutes, and I'm going to try to be very fast with this. I have 2 main messages I want you to take with you basically today. The first one is, okay, maybe I need to introduce, I'm here to advocate for agroecology as a solution, really, to not just for agrobiodiversity, but in general to the implementation of the GBF. And the first message I want you to take with you is that agroecological principles uphold and support agrobiodiversity, but also the knowledge and the right holders. And this is a very important message. And why is that? Because agroecology is based on 13 principles that champion improve resource efficiency, strengthen resilience, and secure social equity. Within the 13 principles, we have one specifically on biodiversity. It's not the only principle that is contributing to the conservation of the biodiversity, but it's there. It's within the DNA of agroecology. Agroecological practices are also conducive to benefits of agrobiodiversity. For example, preserving soil integrity. When there's more organic matter in the soil, there's more biological active soil, there's more increased ability to adapt. And this is just a small sample of the benefits that agroecological practices have for agrobiodiversity. Agroecology also enhances social and equity goals important for agrobiodiversity. Why is this? Because agroecology is a set of practices, for example, that seeks locally adapted food systems. It's a science that studies integrative ecological concepts, cycles, and processes, something that our colleague was referring to. But it's also a movement. It's a social movement that is trying to, for example, decentralize value chains, that is trying to uphold rights and justice, that is fighting for food sovereignty, that is a farmer-centered model, that is a really bottom-up approach, and that it both puts at the heart territories and cultures. This is just some elements of our ecology. I don't have time to really go through everything, but it's some elements that are important and connects to agrobiodiversity. Agroecology has been recognized and is included in the Global Biodiversity Framework as a biodiversity-friendly approach to achieve Target 10. I think there are some briefs with the bird on the table. This really points out at some of these aspects and how agroecology can contribute to this target in particular. But it's not just at the GBF. Agroecology is gaining momentum globally. There is a coalition of 50 countries and 140 organizations that came out of the UNFSS process that is supporting agroecology and trying to support the upscale of it. It's also recognized as a nature-based solution at the World Conservation Congress in 2021. Whether you like nature-based solutions or not, it is recognized and is there. But let me deep a little bit more on the GBF relationship with the GBF and agroecology. So I've shown you the 13 principles, and we think that there are many connections between the targets and the principles. The targets in blue, who are trying to really fight for social equity and fairness, I think we think that they support targets that are emphasizing tools and solutions for the biodiversity problems that we face globally. At the same time, these targets feed back into our ecology and support its upscale. The principles also contribute to all those targets that are related to meeting people's needs. But more importantly, as importantly, is also about contributions to reducing the threats to biodiversity. So in a way, upscaling agroecology, and this is one of the key messages I want you to take with you, the upscale of agroecology is key to achieve the GBF targets for every single country in every single context. We did an analysis on how the principles relate to the targets. I don't want you to focus on the text. I want you to focus on the linkages. On the right-hand side, you have the principles, the 13 principles of agroecology that I showed you. On the left-hand side, you have some of the targets that we selected in the analysis. And as you can see, the linkages are obvious there. These are based on the analysis of the target elements that the Secretariat has identified for each target, and on how the definitions of the principles that have been agreed upon within the ecological community. All of you have a brief, a flyer, sorry, and all of this information is well explained there. So we're here really for calling for countries to actively include agroecology in their updated MSAPs. We are developing a handbook that provides guidance to countries on how to achieve this. And this is a QR code that you can sign up for for a distribution list, as the product is going to be ready in May, and we hope to launch it in the next Substab. But let me just finalize my intervention here by saying that we not just need to integrate agroecology in the MSAPs, but we also need to national agroecology policy frameworks and connect those frameworks with MSAPs, with the NDCs. There has to be a coherence package of policies supporting sustainable agriculture. And this is the last message I would like you to take from my intervention. We have here in the room one of our champions who are really working hard. His name is Muyuni Mtembe. He's from the Ministry of Agriculture of Tanzania, and they are really trying to connect these national policies on agroecology with the MSAP work and with the NDCs.
Yeah, maybe for the interest of time, I want to introduce myself, but I'm Muyuni from the Ministry of Agriculture in Tanzania. And just like what John said, we are now preparing the National Ecological and Agriculture Strategy, and actually to be launched next month in November. And that's mainly because Tanzania is party to most of these, to CBD, but also to these protocols. And but they are, mostly of them are under the national focal point, the Ministry of Environment. And the agricultural sector has also its priorities, but now we were failing to get some linkages on how we can address the priorities, but at the same time being able to be conscious to the environment, but also to biodiversity and the impact of climate change. And so we now are developing this strategy, which we have seen that is able to address most of these conservation issues in the environment, but also increasing resilience to climate change, and at the same time being able to explore opportunities that are there in the mitigation of climate change. And so because of that, we will be launching the strategy, which will mainly be addressing more research, just like other presenters have just provided, research on these nature-based solutions that can be used by smallholder farmers, which relates to agroecology, but also on the conservation of germplasm, but also indigenous genetic resources. To increase capacity on the local institutions that are already doing it, but now to see on how we can best use our genetic resources in addressing food security, but also productivity in agriculture. So maybe just to give an update of what we're doing and on how we are going through the strategies. And this is most to set the frameworks, but also the instruments for agroecology practices, but also for other to access other market opportunities that are there in the agriculture sector in relation to the agroecology markets and organic markets. Thank you.
Thank you so much to both of you. In the interest of time, we won't really have time to go through the video on market approaches just yet, but we will screen it after the closing remarks for anyone who has more time to stay in the room later. Thank you, everyone. Also, thank you for really speeding through this presentation. I'd like to encourage everyone to speak to them, throughout the week a little bit more, get their contact details so that they can explain a little bit more. They didn't have time to really go in depth. So please go reach out to all of the colleagues around the table so that they can tell you more about all of this. Because the enabling environments are really key to be able to scale up all of these practices that we've seen before. A question, yes, I was just about to open the floor. Go ahead.
Not question, but observation. Let me introduce myself. My name is Mariana Sakarian, and I've been leading for more than 15 years UNEP Agricultural Biodiversity portfolio, assisting parties to fulfill their obligations under the CBD and the Program of Work on Agricultural Biodiversity. Until recently, now I'm coordinating UNEP Program of Work on Nature Action. And I'm really seriously concerned because since 2002, we've been repeating in this forum, there are many familiar faces. We have evidence, we have proof of evidence, we have information, we have scientific knowledge about the importance of agricultural biodiversity for resilience, for food security, for human health, ecosystem stability. We spent over 170 million JEF funding, supporting 47 countries around the globe. And still, today we're discussing what's next, and we are providing evidence about the role of agricultural biodiversity. So I think, based on our assessment, and perhaps many of you share this, is that we really didn't manage collectively, parties, agencies, to mainstream biodiversity into policy. And this is really the right momentum. If agriculture sectors, if environment, finance, health, education don't come together and take necessary action within the NDSAPs, and then, funding, secure funding for implementation, nothing will happen. 10 years ago, exactly we did the same things. Not a criticism, but it was 2013 when the Agrobiodiversity Index was launched in COP, and we're still, now talking about this. It's really, parties are here, there are many representatives of private sector, probably NGOs. It's really now the ball is in your hands. And in the next several months, perhaps October next year, if proper actions or provisions are not in NDSAPs, we'll lose the opportunity, maybe for another 10 or 20 years. Sorry, I just kind of...
No, you're right. You're totally right. Thank you so much for emphasizing the call to update the NDSAPs, to include this in the NDSAPs. Again, I do think that it was quite unique to have agroecology being, explicitly emphasized in the GBF framework, but now it's onto the actual implementation. And that was, the whole goal today. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Tobias Kien. I work for the Secretariat of the International Food and Management Resources for Food and Agriculture at NGO. And thank you very much for this comment. The treaty was adopted a long time ago. It specifically focuses on the agrobiodiversity. So we're supporting contracting parties, which are 150, practically overlapping almost all parties also to the CBD. We're supporting them at the policy level to implement conservation sustainable use efforts. So this work has been going on. This comment was really important because what we experience also is that we have a lot of support from the agricultural area. Those people at national level not always talk to the people from the environment. So we did establish, together with partners from the JSN and Bioversity, a series of so-called tandem workshops, which I thought were very, very useful. And thanks again to the partners for collaborating with us on that. So we brought together the National the treaty with the National Focal Point of the Nagoya Protocol and the CBD. And then trying to use this workshop as a starting point to establish ideas on how they could collaborate at the national level. And this was really fruitful. This was the first step, of course, so there needs to be more activities, more actions, but this was a very good initiative. And there were so many interesting and important point is being mentioned in this side event. I just wanted to refer to many activities that we have under the international treaty covering several of these areas. We have farmers' rights, and under farmers' rights, we recently had a global symposium where farmers from all over the world came together to look into possible solutions and scenarios for supporting agrobiodiversity that would really serve them, serve the people. Take it from a people-centered perspective and a rights-based solution, focusing on community seed banks and community seed fairs, on farmer-managed seed systems, and so on, ensuring that farmers have a choice seeds, of those seeds that they want to grow in their fields. You know? And one of the, perhaps I'm taking too much time, but one of the powers of the international treaty perhaps is the convening power, bringing all the people together that play a crucial role in the area of agrobiodiversity. Scientists, plant breeders, farmers, very much representatives of governments and of international research institutions like the CGIAR. So we have a governing body session again in November, and all the people will gather and vote to advance this agenda of the international. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. There was a hand here as well.
Use for the project. And following the discussion, but also the assessment you mentioned, I'm not sure we have a solution, but we propose something. And if people are interested by that, I have more information on that. Next year, probably beginning of July, we will organize probably in Montpellier, perhaps a workshop on the enabling condition of this kind of development, but beyond the technical aspect. So we want to discuss with finance, with insurance, with consumers, with businesses, with institutional, of course, how we can do that. So beyond our technical solutions, I'm a researcher working also with CIAT, so we have a lot of technical and technological and scientific things to share. It's the purpose of Substar, and it's not enough. And as you say, we still repeating every time the same kind of things. So I think we need to put together, as it's mentioned, people coming from agriculture, from biodiversity, but also from finance, etc., together and try to develop what I call a new narrative, just to try to sell this idea. I don't want to use mainstreaming because sometimes it's difficult to work, but I think we need to work together and find some solutions. So people from agriculture agree on that, people from agriculture also. So if you are interested to participate.
Thank you very much. There was a final hand behind, and then we'll go to our closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's
that's great idea. I have a lot of connections. So I think you were completely right. Of course, the states and also other places. But I think the real problem is not showing data, but really contradicting the system of production, which because that's the predominant, let's say, narrative of the policy as we have. And for example, legal providers, when you variety regulations. Brings it back to this such not of who wrote them, we want them to have on that is beside having the data, having the data is always good.
Yeah, thank you very much, Monica.
Sorry to maybe this is a part of the conversation, but just to add a few points. What Maria just said is true. I think one thing that we need to do is alignment between in research and other things. But now I think I see this as a positive thing because we have big opportunity. Many countries, as someone mentioned, is working on the food system pathway. This could be a way to integrate both, or to work closely with the agriculture ministry to have the agriculture national plan aligned with them with that. So I think we have many opportunities now because slowly those silos I see that have been broken. What we were trying for many years during the H targets, I start to see that we start to understand each other. So another thing is that agriculture side also did a lot. If we see many policies in many countries, they have policies on organic agriculture, on soil management, on the treaty, and the Commission on Natural Resources Food and Agriculture. So it's how we take all this in link. I think what we need is very complement. In another day, someone told me, you know why you still have agroecology in agroforestry? Because it was so insignificant for the big industry that they never felt a threat. But this another, I also take positively because now what was so insignificant became urgent, became part of the solution. So I feel confident. In regard to finance that Didier mentioned, I think this was something that we also had as a draft from Nigeria. We had the JET financing, we had JET that we had like this financing, but we also need small financing like from IFAD to help the smallholders and farmers to bring together all these small contributions as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Monica. Thank you for advocating for IFAD replenishment as well. Very appreciated.
Small funder,
Yeah, for now, hopefully just for now. No, but thank you very much. Thank you also for mentioning the big industries. And I think that's quite key and the crux of the question. How do we move from an agricultural sector that is primarily for agricultural commodities and export markets to one that is for nutrition, actually, and for national nutrition? How do we go for that transition? So I hope we did have some good insights on how to do that throughout the conversation today. Lots of takeaways and calls to action now. So thank you very much for your participation. I will not speak more because we're really out of time. And I want to thank Bala Pispati, the head of Biodiversity, Land and Governance Program at UNEP, for giving us closing remarks and being with us today. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Colleagues, good afternoon. Quick ones. Now, for those of us who have been a part of these discussions for many years, certainly the discussions are going to continue. We will hear similar messages in 2030. We will hear similar messages in 2040. And I'm sure we will hear similar messages in 2050 because the systems and the agriculture is something which is going to continue to receive attention. But for those of us who actually follow these discussions for a long number of years, you probably understand that when the discussions started focusing more at the regional and global levels, to an extent national level, we started with food self-sufficiency. Because that was a priority in the 50s and 60s. And then we shifted to self-reliance. It was a totally new kind of discussions, new kind of approaches, new kind of systems that should be put in place. 70s, 80s, we saw a lot of focus on nutrition. We had a whole commission, we had a commission on nutrition, we spoke about hidden hunger, the role of micronutrients, and how countries should focus on ensuring some of these elements to be integrated into activities and policies. And the impact of some of that work, 50s, 60s, and 70s, is what we are seeing now in countries of India. And then we transitioned into looking at agriculture as a part of sustainable development. We had them in the MDGs, the Millennium Development Goals. We had them in the Sustainable Development Goals. And here we have had the targets starting from the 2010 targets, the IG targets, and we have now the global targets. So essentially, the discussions and the focus on these issues are going to stay. So that is not something which we should be really worried about, and we should be happy that these discussions happen. But the context within which these discussions are happening is what has changed from what it was in the 50s to 60s to 70s to 2013. Two key points from the various presentations and discussions I've heard so far. The link to policy. There is so much of science, there is so much of data, there is so much of information. But we still have links that needs to be strengthened between science and policy. We have a number of enabling mechanisms, we have a number of platforms that are supported. But at the country level, we still need to focus on ensuring that science policy is further strengthened. And there was also a mention of this word coherence. And if there is something which we can think of in the context of a lot of these issues that are emerging, whether they are related to soils or climate change or food systems or any of it, coherence in policies is what is going to be guiding a lot of our discussions in the future. And we have had a number of interventions speaking about the need for having an enabling environment to a policy mechanism, national policy, subnational policy, regional and global. So the emphasis should be more on that, and where the national biodiversity strategy is coming to play an important role. The second, to me, I see as a transition into 2030, 2040 is going to be on behavioral change. We still have not addressed it to an extent. We still are discussing a lot of these experiences and these case studies in isolation, in pockets. We have a number of items of success, but how do we scale them up? How do we ensure that these policies, these science, the data and information can bring in that behavioral change? So if I'm going to be like a kind of a fortune teller, looking at the discussion on agrobiodiversity and ecology 10 years or 15 years down the line, I think that is where our emphasis probably will move in, thanks to a lot of involvement of youth, communities, experiences in terms of the successes that we are able to already see on the ground. And that's where for a lot of us, as someone said, if agriculture goes wrong, nothing else can go right. So we need to ensure that some of these discussions get connected and can speak in the future. So we will continue to have these events at top, whatever, top 30. But then the context of the discussion is what is going to be there. And what we are building is actually a complete new edifice in terms of how that kind of transition is going to be sustained. Nobody today speaks to a large extent, I'm not generalizing it globally, of food self-sufficiency. A lot of countries have already achieved, and a lot of countries have already achieved self-reliance. So what is the next one? Nutrition. What is the next one? Into development. So we are progressing, but that progression is going to be interesting for a lot of us. Some of us will be in the room in 2034. Thank you very much. I'm glad for the opportunity.
My name is Charles Dewa. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of an organization called Knowledge Transfer Africa, which is a social enterprise based in Zimbabwe, focusing mainly on knowledge brokering on agriculture, food systems, and rural development. We've been doing this work for more than 10 years. Although we are based in Harare, Zimbabwe, we have tentacles across Africa. We've been monitoring mass markets. By mass markets, we mean those big markets that you find in every African city, which handle a lot of food. In a comparative sense, mass food markets are bigger than supermarkets or processing companies. They also handle diverse commodities. It is easy to find more than 100 different types of commodities in a big mass market. And examples include Mbare in Harare, Makola in Ghana, and in Nigeria is more than 20 those kinds of markets. In Lagos alone, including Idumota. And then we move to East Africa. Nakawa market in Kampala is an example of what we mean by mass markets or territorial markets. They come in different names. Some are local, others are based on livestock. They sell diverse commodities. What makes these markets so unique in advancing agrobiodiversity and food systems is that they represent people's culture in different ways. If you want to find seasonal vegetables, seasonal fruits, you find them in mass markets. they are becoming a preferred source of food. For instance, in a city where supermarkets and processing companies handle maybe 8 tons of potatoes or tubers like yams or sweet potatoes, mass markets will be handling more than 50 tons a day, not a week. This shows that these markets represent entire food systems in many African communities. However, they are undervalued in a big way, although they play a very important role. Most farmers prefer participating in these markets because they play a very important knowledge exchange role. That's where you find different cultures exchanging knowledge in mass markets. For instance, farmers coming from a region where yams are common, they exchange knowledge with farmers from regions where tomatoes, different types of varieties are there. Where contractual arrangements like farmers supplying tomatoes or fruits to processing companies focus on a few value chains only, like tomato types, certain types of varieties of tomatoes, certain types of varieties of fruits. In mass markets, you find dozens, different types of fruits, all competing for the same consumer, which is very important, which is where diversity becomes very important. This is how they advance diversity. Whereas in the formal systems like supermarkets and wholesalers, the emphasis is on a few value chains that are proven, as well as certain sizes of fruits. In mass markets, the diversity increases, which means they really expand and increase the importance of agrobiodiversity. One of the key issues around mass market is that of knowledge co-creation, which is a key principle of agroecology. By their very nature, mass markets are part of agroecology in a big way because they bring together different types of commodities which you wouldn't find in a supermarket or a processing company, which is very important. More importantly, farmers prefer going to these markets because they share knowledge with other farmers, which they can't do when they go to supermarkets or processing companies. So the whole notion of knowledge exchange is very important in a changing climate, as well as in preserving biodiversity, which is very, very important in a changing climate like now. Also, more importantly, these farmers can talk to consumers, directly to consumers. They wouldn't do the same if they go to a supermarket. In these mass markets, people are able to use all their human senses, sense of smell, sense of touch, sense of taste. In a mass market, you can be able to taste carrots, you can taste fruits, which you can't do in a supermarket. So really, this is very important for knowledge exchange, also for nutrition, which is another very, very fundamental issue that we need to focus on in a changing climate. So mass markets, really, they are a very powerful institution which has not been recorded. This is not to say they don't have their own weak points. Like every situation where people congregate, mass markets have got their own challenges. For instance, food safety is a bigger issue. There's also a tendency for some middlemen to really try and take advantage of farmers who may not have good information. But nevertheless, all those weaknesses are far outweighed by the benefits of mass markets. They just need to be written down or to be documented in a proper way. Whereas in formal systems, there is the emphasis on registration of companies. In mass markets, everyone is an entrepreneur, which is very, very important. So they represent indigenous commerce, which hasn't been understood by African policymakers in a big way. Yet they move many commodities. They also create employment for hundreds and thousands of people in cities who would otherwise not have employment. So this is another very, very important role for mass markets, creating employment, making sure there's food diversity, also securing nutrition in a big way. What is missing in these markets is good infrastructure. If that is improved, we would see that they will play a much bigger role in creating employment. If we talk about African Continental Free Trade Area, it cannot happen without these markets. It's not possible to emphasize processing only of food like what happens. These markets show us that food is not only processed products where there are additives. It's about securing food in its natural state, which is why we are now emphasizing the need for new knowledge. Science is missing, especially food science is missing in most African food systems because there is no study of nutrition in indigenous fruits which are seasonal. They come in volumes, but we've not seen scholars or academics coming in to study these markets, these food systems, so that they really are developed in a way that has been developed to the kind of development that happened to hybrids from the global north. So really, there's room to improve these kinds of things, and we think science can have a role there. That is why we are trying to push the whole notion of polymer packaging so that fruits are preserved in their natural state. There's a limit to which you can process food. I think this is well known across the globe. There are very few commodities that are processed. These are grains, a few tomato value chains, a few fruit value chains that can be processed into fruit juice. But you cannot convert all that food into juices. It's not possible. In an agrobiodiversity, which is quite broad like African food systems, it's important to consider how food can be preserved without disturbing its natural state. So we are actually trying to explore notions of using polymer packaging, more like a membrane, where food is preserved, sweet potatoes can be preserved so that when you need them, whatever time you need them, there are times when they are abundant, because they are rain-fed. Most fruits are rain-fed in Africa, and most tomatoes and other food that are grown which were given by Mother Nature, they are all depending on rainfall. So when we get so much rainfall, there is abundance of this food, which we should not lose. The best way is to preserve, not to process into a juice. How do we preserve food when it's abundant? So where is the science? I don't think it requires rocket science to do that. So really, we need innovations. We need young people who are doing innovation hubs as well as universities from the global north. Knowledge exchange could help us really to improve agrobiodiversity in Africa by preserving food. So our mass markets, they are a very important barometer in showing us the diversity of food in a country. For instance, in Zimbabwe is more than 100 types of commodities. You can only see this in a mass market, in a territorial market. You cannot see it in a supermarket or a processing company, which focuses on monoculture. So as we talk about the importance of food diversity in a changing climate, mass markets need to be elevated as very, very powerful institutions. In fact, they are very important institutions which are not being recognized. The most important thing is to recognize, support, and protect these very, very important institutions that secure food systems in African countries. I'll leave it here for now. Thank you very much.